I was wondering if you could take us briefly through how you use signatures of plant to
Mhm.
decide what plant would be good for a specific patient, and then how that process moves through.
One is that you're looking at the plant, for instance, from the aspect of what's the predominant element that's expressed in the plant, and is that the element the person's lacking? Or is this plant like the person? You know, is the plant kind of the vegetable relative of that person? Or I can say, has it mastered the lesson this person hasn't mastered? So, very simple example, for instance, I have a very cold and chilly person. Is this a chili person? And then I use chili peppers because that's a plant that has completely mastered being hot. And I say, look, this can teach your body how to be hotter, how to be more in the nature of fire. That is very simple. In reality, because I have such a profound understanding of each plant that really comes from a lifetime of being with the plants, it gets much, much more subtle than that. To give you one example, for instance, from having loved and grown up and observed horse chestnuts my whole life, I have a very profound understanding of how the tree negotiates gravity in the way it grows its branches. They droop down in a tremendous gesture of giving into gravity, but at the tips come back up as if catching the wind of levity, and they rise up. Then also when the buds come out, the leaves and the flower, there's a tremendous gesture of rising up that's almost like foaming upwards, but then the leaves, as they age, they droop down again. So this is a plant on a much more subtle level that negotiates a very beautiful dance between gravity and levity, which is exactly what the venous blood has to do as it sinks down in the legs into gravity. And then this plant can teach it if it gets stuck down there and misses this wind of levity where it becomes venous and is supposed to rise back up towards the heart, and it pulls down there and it creates varicose veins. This plant can teach it to go back up and not hang down there. And that's a very different matching of a plant to a problem than to say, oh, horse chestnut is for varicose veins, and that's because the tannins are astringent and pull the tissue of the blood vessels, the veins, back together again. That would be a mechanical expression of the miracle of the unfoldment of life force of the tree that I just tried to express.
So you were born in Germany, and one of the things that my podcast wants to focus on is that traditional medicines or indigenous medicines are in every continent. They're all over the world. And in some places, it's easier to identify because of record keeping or traditions than others. But from my understanding, Germany has a really strong foundation of traditional medicine. So what is German traditional medicine?
So German traditional medicine is actually very similar to what you could overall call traditional European medicine. There were, of course, different uses according to the different bioregions. Of course, logically, people were by and large using the plants that were locally available. And there were two, if you wish, two streams of herbal medicine. So the one was what the local people were using, you can say the tribal tradition, and that was using local herbs, usually one at a time, rarely in complex formulas, right? So there was even a term coined for that phenomenon here in Europe. So that has very deep roots in the past. There's a stream coming from ancient Egypt through the Hermetic period, where Egypt, at the end of the Egyptian classical time was actually Greek occupied, mixing with Greek classical medicine, which, you know, comes to us through great names such as Galen, Dioscorides, Hippocrates. We still swear the Hippocratic oath, first of all, do no harm and such. And they already had a system of energetic medicine, you know, as in cooling herbs, warming herbs, and drying herbs, moistening herbs. And that then became a tradition of Roman medicine. And there were great classical authors in each of these countries. And we still have their writings. They dominated the scholastic tradition for at least 2,000 years, right? So, and then they spread. And where they spread, they took herbs with them. So all the Mediterranean, Greek, Roman herbs came to Northern Europe, which is why suddenly we had lavender in England, where it's absolutely not native, English lavender. Or why we have Culpeper in his Renaissance London herbal talk about figs. Figs don't grow anywhere near London, you know? So it's because there was this overlayering. So traditional German medicine is a product of that, of what people did here, you know, the country folks, the wise women, the midwives, and then the scholastic people who took the classical writers. So here in German, the big foundational herbal is 1543. So we now have basically, as a result, what is German herbal medicine is a coming together of all three, whereby the alchemical branch, in my opinion, has mostly survived in homeopathy, which homeopathy is about 200 years old and also started in Germany out of that tradition. So that's a lengthy answer.
That's a great answer. And from what I've read, Hildegard, Saint Hildegard, a Catholic saint, was one of the first herbalists to have a pharmacopoeia. Is that true?
Well, if you're talking about a written physical book, yes, that is true for Germany. She was several hundred years before Leonhard Fuchs, yeah. You know, she really took her knowledge more from the country folks. So there are several people, great writers, who integrated the folk tradition into writing without intellectualizing it in a scholarly way. So one of them is Hildegard. And so therefore her uses are also quite unique. I think she also had a real genius of working with healing plants, and it represents also the plant she was using represents very much her region, her bioregion. Another person was Paracelsus, who he was even a doctor and an alchemist, right? But he says in his writings, I never felt myself basically too snobbish and arrogant to talk to the meanest, means the lowest of country women to find out how she's using the herbs. He knew damn well that the people who know best how to work with plants are the local folks and the local women. So he traveled far and wide all over Europe to collect those, let me call them voices, and make them part of his herbal writings. And that fame endures to this day. We still call him the father of modern medicine as well as the father of modern chemistry, because he was also an alchemist.
Yeah, the quote of his that sticks with me is really the difference between a poison and a medicine is dose. And yes. I think about that in herbs, and I think about that in life too, spiritually.
Yes,